Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today, we are studying Daf Kuf Chaf Hey of Masechta Shabbos, Daf 125. Let us do an overview before we begin. We're going to continue our discussion of things that are allowed to be moved on Shabbos and how you can move them, in what conditions, things like that. We're going to talk about moving pieces of a broken oven. Very cool. Can you if you put a stone on a barrel to cover it, like a wine barrel or something, what do? Can you move the stone to take out the wine? We talk about setting aside rows of stones. If you want some stones to sit on, what do? And we're going to talk about tying a grapevine to a pitcher so that you could lower the pitcher into a well or something and take out some water. Friends, let's get started. We're going to start on Daf Kuf Chaf Hey, all the way at the top, in the top line. Amar Ba'ameduri, Amar Shmuel, Kromiel Shomachzeles, Mutar Tatalin B'Shabbos. So it says Bar Hameduri, in the name of Shmuel, that these little pieces of a mat, you're allowed to move them on Shabbos. So if you have a mat made out of some kind of reeds, and some of the reeds and stuff falls off, gets separated from the mat. So you're allowed to move them, these little separated reeds, you'd be allowed to move on Shabbos. My time, how come? Amar Rava, Bar Hameduri Asberli. So Rava says, well, Bar Hameduri explained it to me. What did he say? Machzeles gufa l'maychazia. Well, if you think about the mat itself, what do you do with a mat? B'chisuye be'afra. Well, you use it to cover up dirt and stuff like that. So these little things that got separated from the mat, you can use it for the same purpose, which is to cover up, dirty kind of things. So it's essentially the same thing, maybe just a smaller, disconnected version, but you could nonetheless move it on Shabbos. Amar Bzera, Amar Rab, Shiyare Pruzmios, Asur L'Tazlim B'Shabbos. It says Bzera, in the name of Rab, that there's pieces of a talus. Imagine a talus. So pieces of it. Also the Tatzlan b'Shabbos. Amar Abaye b'matlanios shein bain shalosh al shalosh to l'chazin l'aniyim v'lashirim. It says Abaye, when we say that you can't move these pieces of a talus that get disconnected, that's talking about when these pieces have less than 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, because if it's that small, that it's less than shalosh al shalosh, well then it's not fit for poor people or wealthy people. It's not fit for anybody. Therefore, it is muktzeh. Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shivrei Tanur Yashan, Harein Kichol Akelim Anitalim B'Chatzir Div Rabbi Meir. Okay. If you have an old oven, okay, and it breaks, okay, so they are like all of the kelim that are able to be carried in the chatzer. And we're going to have to understand what this means. But Rabbi Meir says if you have an oven that breaks, so the resulting pieces of the oven are movable like all the kelim in the chatzer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eini Talin, Rabbi Yehuda says they may not be moved. Okay? Hey, Rabbi Yossi Mishum Rabbi Eliezer ben Yankiv. So now Rabbi Yossi testified in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Al Shivrei Tanur Yashan Shenitalim B'Shabbos. He testified, thing number 1, that pieces of an old oven that has broken, these pieces can be moved on Shabbos. Val kisuyo shenu tzarich beis yad, and that the cover of an oven does not need a handle in order to be able to carry it. And we will discuss carrying things based on their handles in tomorrow's daf. Fine. Now, the Gemara is going to now try to understand the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa that we just quoted, right? We said that if you have an oven that breaks, Rabbi Meir says that the resulting pieces can be carried like any kli in the chatzer, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says that they may not be carried. Now, of course, this sounds very similar to our Mishnah, right? Sounds very similar to our Mishnah, where we said that if you have a kli and the kli breaks, Rabbi Meir said, look, as long as you can use it for any purpose, whether it's to, cover up some kli or something, it's fine, you can move it. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it has to, retain its initial purpose. So if it's a mixing bowl, you still have to be able to pour like oatmeal in it or something, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So let's see how this machlokas plays out in the context of this brayso that we just learned. But my kamifligay. So the Gemara says, what is the machlokas in this brayso that we just quoted between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? Amar Abaye, ba'osen me'ein melacha, ve'ein osen me'ein melachton kamifligay. So Abaye says, well, the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda here is the same machlokas as in our Mishnah. That it's talking about a situation where you have the tanur, you have the oven. The oven broke, now you have pieces of an oven. Now these pieces are no longer usable as an oven, but they are usable, let's just, as a simple example, to cover up some kind of a kli. So they are usable, but not for their original purpose. So, like in our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says that you would be able to move it. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot move it. Fine. Rabbi Yehuda l'taime, Rabbi Meir l'taime. And Rabbi Yehuda goes just like his reasoning in the Mishnah, which is that they have to be used for their same original purpose, whereas Rabbi Meir says that no, it's good enough that they can be used for some new purpose as long as they are usable as a kli. Maskif la Rava. However, Rava asks a kasha on Abaye. Yochi, Abaye, if this is so, that we're just talking about basically a kli that broke and its kalim are usable for some other purpose, and its pieces are usable for some other purpose. Rava says, Abaye, according to your explanation of this machlokas, there's nothing unique about an oven here. The brayso is talking about an oven that broke. And specifically in the case of an oven that broke, Rabbi Meir says that you can move the pieces. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't. Abaye, according to your explanation, it's literally the same thing as in our Mishnah. It has nothing to do with an oven. It has to do with any vessel that breaks, and you have the resulting pieces. As long as the pieces are usable for something, Rabbi Meir would say that you can move it. Rabbi Yehuda would say that you can't. It has to maintain its initial functionality. So Rava is not satisfied with Abaye's suggestion, since there's really nothing about it that's unique to an oven, and the brayso is in the context of an oven. So Ella, Amar Rava, b'shivrei dehai tanur kamifligay. Says Rava, rather this machlokas is about the pieces of the following oven that broke. Now listen up, friends. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah in our favorite Masechta, who could tell me what our favorite Masechta is? Masechta Kelim. Nisanu al pi abor, o al pi adus, v'nasan sham even. So if you have an oven, and you put it in the opening of some kind of a pit or a cistern, okay? So, friends, let's try to draw a picture here in our minds, okay? You go to the ground, you take a shovel, and you dig out a little pit. Great. Now, you build a fire in this pit. We're not just talking about like a little fire pit. We're talking like your mom build a pit. It's deep, deep enough. Like there's mom like a hole in the ground, okay? And then at the bottom of the hole, you put some fire. And then above the hole, or no, not above the hole, then you take an oven and you stick the oven into this hole, right? So you have a hole in the ground, you have a fire at the bottom of the hole, you take your oven, which of course we know ovens then were basically just like a cylinder, right? An earthenware cylinder, and you stick that earthenware cylinder into the ground, okay? And then the plan is you're going to take some doughs and you're going to slap them on the walls and you're going to bake some bread. Okay? So, and then you take some kind of a stone and some kind of little stone, you put it on the side of the oven, whatever, just to hold it in place, to wedge it in place. Seder. Fine. Now, listen up. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Imasik milamata v'unisok milamayla tamei v'imlav tar. So if you can take this fire and put it at the bottom of this pit, and it will generate enough heat to heat up the oven so that you can bake your bread, well then, this oven is mukhshar lekabel tumah. Then it is able to become tameh. V'im lav tahor. However, if this oven would be unable to get heated up by the fire that's at the bottom of the pit, i.e. the fire that's on the ground, well then it's not considered connected to the ground, and therefore it will not be mukhshar lekabel tumah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the oven must be connected to the ground and be able to get heated up from the ground. And therefore, when you have this fire at the bottom of the pit, and the fire at the bottom of the pit generates enough heat to heat up the oven that is in the pit, well then the oven is sufficiently considered connected to the ground, and it will be mukhshar lekabel tumah. However, says Rabbi Yehuda, if the fire is too low down, and it is unable to heat up the oven, and the only way that you would be able to sufficiently heat up the oven would be to put some bricks at the bottom of the pit and raise up the fire from the ground so that it could heat up the oven. In that case, the oven isn't sufficiently considered connected to the ground because it's unable to get heated up from the bottom from the fire that's, on the ground at the bottom of the pit. You'd have to raise it up. In that case, the oven is not sufficiently considered part of the ground, and therefore will not be mukhshar lekabel tumah. We will explain his reasoning in a minute. Whereas the Chachamim are not so picky, they say, look, as long as you lit the fire at the bottom of the pit, that is enough to make this oven tameh. It doesn't necessarily have to, or even meaning, as long as you lit a fire and this oven is in the pit, it doesn't matter that the fire is at the bottom of the pit. It doesn't matter if the fire has to be raised up in order to heat up the oven, meaning whether or not the oven is considered sufficiently connected to the ground or not. It really makes no difference. Either way, this oven will be mukhshar lekabel tumah. Now, what is this machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, where Rabbi Yehuda requires that in order for this oven to be mukhshar lekabel tumah, it has to be connected to the ground, and the Chachamim say it doesn't matter whether or not this oven is considered connected to the ground? So the Gemara answers by Ikra. They're arguing about how to understand the following pasuk. What does the pasuk say? It says by Tumas Sheretz, Tanur v'chirayim yutatz tmeim heim utmeim yu lachem. So now there are two interesting things in this pasuk. So first of all, it says Tanur v'chirayim yutatz, that if you have an oven or a stove that become tameh from a sheretz, so it says Tanur v'chirayim yutatz, you have to demolish an oven or a stove. To demolish. Friends, when we talk about demolishing, what's something that we demolish? A building, a house, a structure, something that's connected to the ground, you demolish. You don't demolish metaltlin. If you have a water pitcher and you need to break it, you don't demolish it, you break it. Demolition is for karka. Demolition is for houses, for buildings, for structures. Tmeim, okay, and then the Mishnah, the pasuk continues. Tmeim heim, okay, these things are tameh. Utmeim yu lachem, and they'll be tameh to you. Now that's the second interesting part, which is, what's the deal with the utmeim yu lachem, that they will be tameh for you? Why couldn't we just say tmeim heim? What do we learn at utmeim yu lachem from these additional words? So this is going to how to understand what's the deal with like demolition in the context of an oven. And what's the deal with these extra words about Tmeim Yulachem? That is the different, how to understand this pasuk is going to be the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda Savar, so Rabbi Yehuda held, Mechusar Netitza Tameh, She'ein Mechusar Netitza Tahor. So, Rabbi Yehuda says, that in order for an oven to be tameh, it has to be connected to the ground. It has to be something that can be demolished. And demolition is by something that's connected to the ground. And therefore, only when this oven is considered sufficiently connected to the ground. Whether that means, in a general case where you literally just take this earthenware oven, stick it on the ground, you didn't build a pit. In a regular case, you just stick it on the ground, put some fire on the ground, and it heats up the oven. Well, it'll be considered connected to the ground. And you then insulate it and really seal in the heat to the ground. So in that case, it will be considered part of the ground, and it will be muksher l'kabel tumah. And since it's considered connected to the ground, in order to break it, you would apply the description of demolition, because it's connected to the ground. And therefore, in this case of the pit, Rabbi Yehuda says, look, if you have a pit and you have a fire at the bottom of the pit, and you could stick this oven in the pit, okay, and it'll be able to get sufficiently hot. The oven will be able to get sufficiently hot from the fire that's at the bottom of the pit. Well, then it's considered right on the ground at the bottom of the pit. So then it's considered that the oven is part of the ground, and it'll be muksher l'kabel tumah. However, if the oven would not be able to get hot enough from the fire that's at the bottom of the pit on the ground, and you would have to, put the fire on like bricks or something like that, you would have to raise it up somehow, in which case the oven is not being heated up from the fire that's on the ground, it's being heated up by you'd have to raise it up using some other intermediary, so it's not considered part of the ground, in which case it would not be muksher l'kabel tumah according to Rabbi Yehuda. V'Rabbanan savre, whereas the rabbis hold, Tmeim yu lachem mikol makom, whereas the rabbis say, yeah, but then it says at the end of the pasuk, Tmeim yu lachem. What's the deal with those extra words? It already says Tmeim heim. Why do I need Tmeim yu lachem? So they say it's a riboy to say mikol makom in any way, whether the fire, right, whether the oven is getting heated up directly from the fire that's on the ground, or whether it's not getting heated up from the fire on the ground, but the fire has to be raised up, and it's not considered part of the ground, and the oven is not considered connected to the ground. It makes no difference. The oven doesn't have to be connected to the ground. It'll still become muksher l'kabel tumah. So now, okay, v'Rabbanan nam yaksiv yutat. But no, according to the Rabbanan, what do you do with the word yutat, which implies demolition, which implies that it would have to be considered connected to the ground, as Rabbi Yehuda says. So now how can you say that it could be muksher l'kabel tumah even if it's not connected to the ground? Then what's the point of using the description of demolition, which implies that it has to be connected to the ground? So listen up. They say you got it all wrong. That's not to say that only something that's connected to the ground, only an oven that's connected to the ground is muksher l'kabel tumah. No, it's to say that even an oven that is connected to the ground is muksher l'kabel tumah. Certainly, if it's not connected to the ground, it'll be muksher l'kabel tumah. Even if it is connected to the ground, it's still muksher l'kabel tumah. That's the chiddush, because of course we know that generally karka is not makabel tumah. In general, karka is not makabel tumah. Metaltlin is makabel tumah. Kalim are makabel tumah. In general, something that's connected to the ground would not be makabel tumah. Therefore, it's a chiddush to say that if you have an oven that's connected to the ground, that it will be muksher l'kabel tumah. And that is what the chiddush of the pasuk is saying, is that tana v'chirayim yutat, that when it comes to an oven and a stove, even though they require demolition, even though they're connected to the ground, they could still become tameh. This Haggadah Techamina, I may have thought to say, that I may have thought to say that since the oven or the stove are connected to the ground, they should be treated like the ground, and they're not muksher l'kabel tumah. Kamash malan, that's why it says tana v'chirayim yutatz, that you'll demolish an oven or a stove, to say that even if they're connected to the ground, they would still be muksher l'kabel tumah, unlike kalim in general. V'idach nami oksiv tmei miulachem. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, what do you do with tmei miulachem? What do you do with this riboy that the Chacham say comes to include also kalim that aren't connected to the ground? So the Gemara answers, Ahi kid Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Well, that would just be like Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Machlokes behesek rishon, ava behesek sheni, afilu tali b'tzaver gamo. It says in the name of Shmuel that this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is by the hesek rishon. But by the hesek sheni, even Rabbi Yehuda would admit that it wouldn't have to be considered connected to the ground. What does this mean? It means that the first time that you heat up an oven, that is what really seals the deal. That is what really completes the construction of this oven. The first time that you heat it up and the clay gets hardened. The earthenware gets hardened. And that's a significant sort of burning. And that is where the Chacham and Rabbi Yehuda have this argument. That Rabbi Yehuda says, look, for this first time using the oven, it would have to be considered connected to the ground. And that is what he learns out from Tana B'chirayim Yutatz, that in order for it to be Moshe L'Kabel Tumah, i.e. the first time that you heat up this oven and you complete it as being a kli, to be able to be Makabel Tumah, that has to be within a context of demolition. It has to be in a context of that it's connected to the ground. In that first time heating up the oven, if it's not considered connected to the ground, it will not be Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah forever. Whereas the Chachamim disagree, and they say, no, even that first time heating up the oven, it doesn't have to be connected to the ground. It can even be dangling from the neck of a camel. Makes no sense. It makes no difference. It would still be considered a kli and it would still be Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. So really the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, does the oven need to be connected to the ground or not? That is only the first time you're heating it up. And the big nafkamina is, will this kli now be Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah or not? If it's not connected to the ground, Rabbi Yehuda would say that it isn't Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. The Chachamim say that it is Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. However, when it comes to the second time that you heat up this oven, then even Rabbi, if the first time you heated up the oven, it was considered connected to the ground, it was Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah, even Rabbi Yehuda would admit that the second time you heat it up, it doesn't matter, it could be hanging from a camel's neck, it makes no difference. It'll still be Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. And so according to Rabbi Yehuda, that is what he learns out from Utmei Miu Lachem, that it includes that from the second time on, even if it is not considered connected to the ground, it would still be Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. Amar Ula says, Ula v'esek rishon l'rabbanan afilu tali b'tzaver gamo. For clarification, Ula says that according to the Chacham, even the first time you heat up this oven, it doesn't have to be considered connected to the ground. It could be dangling from the neck of a camel, as we already said. So therefore, friends, putting it back into context, what does Rava say? What's Rava's point? What's he saying about the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa about the oven? He says this. He says that the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is in an oven that was not considered connected to the ground the first time it was heated up. That Rabbi Yehuda says that since the first time it was heated up, it was not connected to the ground, therefore it is not Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. And it's not a kli. It's not considered a kli. And therefore, if on Shabbos it breaks, well, its pieces are also not considered a kli, and they're muksa, you can't move them. Whereas Rabbi Meir holds like the Chachamim that no, even if the first time this oven was heated up, it was not connected to the ground, it's still Mukshar L'Kabel Tumah. It's still a kli. And therefore, if it breaks on Shabbos, or even before Shabbos, then, or no, I guess it would be on Shabbos. It was before Shabbos and whatever, it was that whole machlokes that we had. But even if it breaks on Shabbos, as long as, I think we said that the machlokes ended up being, really, if it breaks on Shabbos, right? So if it breaks on Shabbos, then you have this kli that's still usable for something, so then it will be, you will be able to move it according to Rabbi Meir, because the oven was already considered a kli. Maskef Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi asked the kasha on Rava. If that's the case, Rava, adamiflige b'shivri taner lipalgu b'taner gufa. Rav Ashi says, yeah, but Rava, that was a very awesome, thorough suggestion. But at the end of the day, says Rav Ashi, I have a question on you, Rava. According to you, Rava, why is the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about pieces of an oven? Just say that the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is about the oven itself. That according to Rabbi Meir, the oven would be considered a kli, and therefore it's movable on Shabbos. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the oven isn't considered a kli, because the first time it was heated up, it was not connected to the ground. Therefore it's not considered a kli, and it's muktzah, and you can't move it on Shabbos. What's the difference, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it is broken or if it's not broken? The fact of the matter is, the reason why you can't move it is because the oven itself is not a kli, because the first time it was heated up, it was not connected to the ground. Right? So Maskefla Rav Ashi asked the kasha, Ihachi, if so, Rava, Adam Iflige B'Shivrei Tana Lipagu B'Tana Gufa. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing about a broken oven, but the fact of the matter is, according to you, Rava, they could just as easily just argue about the oven itself. Hashta Taner Gufa lo Rabbi Yehuda lo havimana shvarav mibaya. If according to Rabbi Yehuda, the oven itself isn't even a kli, because the first time it was heated up, it was not connected to the ground. Well then, obviously, its pieces, when it breaks, those pieces aren't going to be considered a kli. It was never a kli in the first place. So what's the deal with the pieces? Why are they arguing about the pieces? Ella. Rav Ashi lo'olim kedamar meikar. Rav Ashi says, really, the way to explain this machlokes is the way Abaye explained it. Which is that we're talking about a kli that broke, and Rav Meir says that Rav Meir would hold that as long as its pieces are usable, so then it is movable on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda says that it would have to be movable in the same way that it was movable initially. In the same way that it was used initially. Right? Well, I don't know what I just said, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, this broken oven, the pieces would have to be usable in a similar way to how they were usable initially when they were part of the oven. Okay. Tipka. And here we're talking about when the oven broke, these pieces are still able to be used in a way that you can kind of bake a bread on it. What does this mean? It means that, okay, so generally, how do you use an oven? The oven is like this earthenware cylinder. You heat it up, you take some dough, you slap it on the walls of the oven, and the oven bakes, and and the bread bakes in the oven on the wall. Now what happened? The oven broke, okay? But it broke in such a way that you have like these like shards. And what you can do is you can create a fire, and you can put the broken shard on top of the fire. The shard will get really hot, and then you can take some dough and put it on top of the shard. And now you can use it in the same way that it was usable before. Before it was used as an oven to bake bread, and you can still use this shard to cook bread on top of by placing it on the hot shard. Rab Meir ledvarav Rabbi Yehuda ka'amar. And Rab Meir, when he's stating his opinion in his brisa, he's really just responding to Rabbi Yehuda. So meaning, what's Rab Meir's opinion? Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, right? We know Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Yesterday in our Mishnah we had the Tanakama. Tanakama said that if you have a kli that breaks on Shabbos, as long as its pieces are usable for something, so then it's going to be movable on Shabbos. And therefore, if you have this oven, and the oven breaks, as long as its pieces are usable for something, even just like to cover a kli, something totally different than it was usable originally, Rabbi Meir would say that you can move it. What's going on in this Mishnah is that it's talking about where you have an oven, and it broke in such a way that you can now use this shard, put it on top of a fire, it'll get really hot, and you put a dough on that, and it'll become some kind of a bread. And what Rabbi Meir is saying is that, hey, Rabbi Yehuda, I get you. According to you, the broken oven would have to be usable in a similar way that it was usable earlier, when it was an oven. And what Rabbi Meir is saying, so at least admit that when it breaks in this manner, that these pieces can be put on top of a fire and become really hot, and you can, bake a bread on it. So, Rabbi Yehuda, wouldn't you admit that in this case, it would be considered usable in a similar way that it was usable initially, and you'd be able to move these pieces on Shabbos? Right, again, Rabbi Meir, l'dvarav Rabbi Yehuda kamer, that Rabbi Meir in this brisa is talking to Rabbi Yehuda and saying, L'didi afilu ba'osin me'ein melacha. That according to me, I say, even if you can use these shards to like close a barrel or something, that would be enough, no problem. But el l'didach odi limiyah. But according to you, that the pieces would have to be usable in a similar way to how they were usable initially, at least admit to me, at least admit to me that in this case, when you can put this shard on top of the fire and bake a bread that way, that would be considered me'ein melachto. Rabbi Yehuda lo dami. Rabbi Yehuda says no, that wouldn't be considered me'ein melachto. You still wouldn't be able to move this shard. Hasam eseko mi b'fnim, hacha eseko mi b'chutz. Hasam mu'umad, hacha lav mu'umad. There are two big differences between when it was an oven and now when it's a shard. Difference number one is that when it's an oven, the oven is heated up from inside of the oven. Wherever over here, the shard is not being heated up inside the shard, it's being heated up from outside the shard. And difference number two is that when you bake a bread in an oven, you bake the dough on the wall of the oven. Here you'd put it on top of the shard. Therefore, the shard is fundamentally different than an oven, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda maintains that you would not be able to move this shard. Hey, Rabbi Yossi Mishum Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi testified in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov al Shivrei Tanur Yashan, about these broken pieces of an old oven, shenitalim b'Shabbos, that they can be moved on Shabbos, v'al kisuyo she'enu tzarich beis yad, and that the cover of an oven does not need a handle. Amar Ravina k'ma metaltalinon ha'idna kisui d'tanuri d'mata mechasya dein lem beis achiza. Says Ravina, in mata mechasya, people carry on Shabbos these covers of ovens that do not have a handle on them. Who do they, right? Based on who are they relying on when they carry these oven covers that do not have handles on them? Kiman Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. They're assuming like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that he says that you're allowed to carry covers of ovens that do not have handles on them. Okay? New Mishnah. Ha'even shebikeruya. If you have a stone in a pumpkin. Okay, now a pumpkin is pretty big and it's pretty hollow. And what you could do is you could use it to fill up water in it. That you can kind of submerge it in water, and water will get in the pumpkin. And you fill up the pumpkin, you get some water. And the thing is that the pumpkin is not very heavy. It's pretty light, apparently. I haven't really tested it out. But I guess once you dry out a pumpkin, it gets pretty light. And therefore, it doesn't submerge so good in the water. So what you do is you put a stone in there, and the stone weighs down the pumpkin, and then it can get submerged in the water. You can fill up lots of water in this pumpkin. It sounds really fun. So Evan Shebikeruya, so if you have a stone that's in this dried out pumpkin that you want to use to fill up with water, so if you could fill up this pumpkin with water and the stone will remain in the pumpkin, well, great. You can fill up this pumpkin with water on Shabbos, no problem. We don't say, the concern is that, if the stone would be considered muktzah, well then, since the pumpkin is holding the stone, the pumpkin can be considered a basas adavar aser, a base for something that's aser, and it would not be movable. But we're saying that as long as the stone will remain inside of the pumpkin, when you fill up the pumpkin with water, well then it's considered part of the pumpkin, part of the kli, and you will be able, it won't be muktzah. You'll be able to move it on Shabbos, the pumpkin on Shabbos, to fill up the water. However, if the stone would not be able to stay in the pumpkin, well then it would be considered, right, the stone would not be considered part of the pumpkin. The pumpkin would be a basas adavar aser, and you wouldn't be able to move the pumpkin. Okay? And therefore you wouldn't be able to use it to fill up water on Shabbos. If you have a grapevine, and you want to connect this grapevine to a pitcher, and then the pitcher you can then use to submerge in water and fill it up. So the grapevine will be almost like a rope, and you could dangle down the pitcher on this grapevine and fill it up with water. So we say that as long as the grapevine is tied to the pitcher, Shabbis. So as long as the grapevine is tied to the pitcher, you will be able to dangle to lower the pitcher into the water and fill up the pitcher on Shabbos. Window shutters. Okay, if you have a window, right? So they had windows in their home, and I guess a window is basically like a hole in the wall. So if you wanted to close the window, you would have some kind of a board of sorts, and the board would be dangling by a rope. You would pull up the board, you would fasten it to the window. Now the window is closed. So pkaka chalon, the shutter of a window. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Bismanchu kosher v'talu pokakim bo v'mlavim pokakim bo. Rabbi Eliezer says, look, in order to be able to use a window shutter on Shabbos, this board, this shutter would have to have two characteristics. It would have to be tied up to the house, but it also would have to be dangling. If it's resting on the floor, it's not allowed. It would be too similar to binyan, to like building, adding onto your house. So it needs two characteristics. It has to be tied and dangling from the house. Then you could pull it and add it to the house. But if it's neither tied, if it's missing one of those characteristics, mistama, in order for it to be dangling, it would have to be tied. But he's saying it needs to have both. The Chacham say either way you could still use it to close your window, and the Gemara is gonna try to figure out, not today but tomorrow, the Gemara is going to try to figure out what does this mean. The Chacham say that it would have to be tied but not necessarily dangling, or they say it doesn't have to be tied. We'll have to figure that out. Tanan awesome. We learn over there, and Daf Kuf Mem Beis Mem Beis. Even she'al pi achaves mata al tzida v'nofeles. We have a Mishnah, and the Mishnah says that if you have a stone on top of a barrel, let's say you have a barrel of wine, and it's being closed by a stone, and you want to get the wine out of the barrel, but there's a stone on top of the barrel. What do? How do you remove the stone so that you can access the wine? Because the stone is muktzah, isn't it? Well, that's what we got to figure out. So the Mishnah recommends, just mate al tzida v'nofeles. Well, what you could do is you could just tilt the barrel, and then the stone will just kind of fall off on its own. Okay, fine. That's the Mishnah's suggestion. Amr Rabba, Amr Bi'ami, Amr B'Yochanan. It says Rabba in the name of Rabbi Ami, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ele b'shocheach. When the Mishnah says that you tilt the barrel and the stone falls off, that is talking about when you forgot the stone there. You didn't put it there intentionally, you forgot it there, and now it's on top of the barrel. You want to get the wine out of the barrel, so just tilt the barrel and the stone will fall off. But what if you put the stone there intentionally? Well, then you would not be able to move the barrel to tilt it so that the stone will fall off, because if you intentionally put the stone on top of the barrel, well, the stone is muktzah, and now the barrel becomes a basis l'davar asur, a base for something that's asur, for this muktzah stone, and you would not be able to move the barrel so that the stone will slide off. Rav Yosef, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu ele b'shocheach. Okay, so he agrees with Rabbah in that this Mishnah that says tilt the barrel means when you forgot the stone there. Aval b'maniach naisa kisu de'achavis. But he disagrees with Rabbah and says that if you put the stone there intentionally, well, then that means that the stone is actually the cover of the barrel. It's the cover, it's the seal of the barrel. And therefore, it's part of the barrel. You can literally just pick it up and take it off and get the wine out. You don't need to tilt the barrel so that it falls off. So that's a machlokes between Rabbah and Rav Yosef. That according to Rabbah, if you intentionally put a stone on top of the barrel, well, that would make the barrel a basis l'davar asur. There would be no way to remove the stone from the barrel. Whereas according to Rav Yosef, if you intentionally put the stone on the barrel, well, that stone is a covering for the barrel, and you can just remove it and take out the wine normally. Amar Rabba Musvina Nashmaitin. Rabba was then having second thoughts about his opinion. And he said, you know what? Maybe from our Mishnah, maybe I'm not correct. That by putting a stone on the barrel, it would make it a basas udavar also. Because what does our Mishnah say? Ha'evan shebekeiruya. Well, if you put a stone in a pumpkin, in mimalin ba ve'en nofeles, mimalin ba. Well, the Mishnah says that if you take a stone and just put it in a pumpkin, as long as it's not going to fall out, well, you could fill up the pumpkin with water. You can move the pumpkin to fill it up with water. So maybe that implies that if I just take a stone and put it on top of the barrel, I would be able to move the barrel. It wouldn't be considered a basas udavar aser. Viloi. But then he says, no, actually forget it. No, that's not a problem for me. How come? Hasam came the hadka shavya dofen. No, over there by the pumpkin, he fastened it to the pumpkin. Because he fastened it to the pumpkin, it makes it part of the pumpkin, and that's why you can move it. Over here, the guy literally just placed it on top of the barrel. That's not going to make it part of the barrel, and I maintain my opinion that it will be a basas udavar aser. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, Umosvina Nashmaitin. Now Rav Yosef was also having second thoughts. Rav Yosef, who says that merely placing the stone on top of the barrel would make it a cover, was having second thoughts, because what does our Mishnah say? In lav, ein memalimba. That if the stone would fall out, if you would simply just put the stone in the pumpkin and it would fall out when you fill up the pumpkin, well then you would not be able to move the pumpkin in order to fill it up with water. Well, then wouldn't that imply maybe that simply putting this stone on top of the barrel would not make it a proper cover, and then maybe I shouldn't be able to move the barrel, and certainly not the stone. Vilohi. But then he says, no, it's not a good kasha. Hasam came into lohadka batule betela. No, over there, he says, since you didn't since over there, by the pumpkin, when you didn't fasten it to the pumpkin, so you're mevatel it from being a kli. You clearly have, meaning it's going to fall out, it's not going to serve any purpose, and you're not going to be able to fill up the pumpkin anyways, if the stone's going to fall out. Clearly you have no intention of this rock being part of the kli, and that's why you can't move the pumpkin. But in this case, putting the stone on top of the barrel, it's a proper lid. It's a good lid. And therefore, Rav Yosef says that, maintains his opinion that simply putting the stone on top of the barrel would make it a good cover for the barrel, and you would be able to remove it to take out the wine. Now, what exactly is the real machlokas between Rabbah and Rav Yosef? How come Rabbah says that when you take this stone and put it on top of the barrel, it is not considered a cover, and it's just considered muktzah, and now the barrel becomes a basas udavar aser? How come Rav Yosef says it's considered a good cover for the barrel, and you can simply remove the stone and take out the wine? Well, Rabbah says, no, it's not enough to simply take a stone and put it on top of a barrel and say, hey, look, I have a cover for the barrel. No, you need something more significant. Simply placing a stone there is not significant enough. Whereas Rav Yosef says, you don't need a maaseh. You don't need a maaseh. Simply placing a stone on top of the barrel would be enough to say, hey, look, it's a cover, that's fine. And that's a cover, and then on Shabbos you'd be able to remove it to take out the wine. The Gemara says, V'azdu l'taimayu. The Gemara says, and Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi go according to their reasoning. Meaning, remember, Rabbah, who said that putting a stone on top of the barrel would not be enough to make it a cover, well, he was quoting Rabbi Ami in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbah, who says that you need a significant maaseh, he's saying in the name of Rabbi Ami in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now, Rav Yosef, who says you don't need a significant maaseh, it's enough if you just take the stone, put it on top of the barrel, now you have a cover, mazel tov. Well, he was quoting Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, right? And he's saying that you don't need a significant ma'aseh. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi are consistent with their reasoning. Dechi asa Rav Dimi Am Reb Chanina, Barmila Am Reb Zera Am Reb Chanina, because when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said in the name of Reb Chanina, and some say the ma'aseh was Reb Zera in the name of Reb Chanina. What did they say? Pam achas halach Rebbe lemakom echad. One time Rebbe went to a certain place with a bunch of students, umatza nidbach shalavanim, and it was a Friday, and he saw over there a row of stones. And he was thinking ahead, and he was thinking, wow, well, tomorrow we could probably use these stones to sit on, and we can have shiurim and all sorts of stuff like that. So v'amar the Talmidav, so Rebbe said to his students, Tzu'u v'chishvu kedei sheneshev alein l'machar, v'lo etzricham Rebbe l'maiseh. So he said, hey students, go and sort of just have kavana that we're going to use these stones tomorrow for sitting on, and then we'll be able to move them tomorrow and put them where we want to put them, and we'll be able to use them. And Rabbi Abba, some say it was Reb Zera, in the name of Reb Chanina, said that Rebbe didn't require his students to actually do anything, just to, have kavana to use them tomorrow, and then they could just use them tomorrow, they won't be muktzah. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Hitzrichan Rebbe l'maiseh. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan disagreed with Rabbi Chanina, and he said that's not true. Rebbe did require that the students should do something. It's not enough just to think that I want to use these stones tomorrow. You have to do something. My Amrlu, so what did he tell them to do? So Rabbi Ami, who says that you need a significant maiseh, like Rabbah, Amr Tzu'u v'limdum Amrlu. So Rabbi Ami said that Rebbe said to his students, go and actually put the stones where you're going to want to sit on them tomorrow. And by putting them out and ordering them where we're going to want them, well, that's a significant ma'aseh. That's clearly indicating that we intend to use them tomorrow, and that would make them mukhan. That would make them usable tomorrow. Rabbi Asi Amar Tzu v'shavshefum Amarlu. Whereas Rabbi Asi requires a less significant ma'aseh, like Rav Yosef, who says you could simply just put a stone on top of a chavis and call it a lid. He says no. All Rebbe required of them was to, clean off the dirt that was on them. You didn't have to actually pick them up and schlep them over to where you wanted to put them. Even just a smaller ma'aseh would be enough to make them considered mukhan, such as just brushing off any dirt that might be on the stones. Itmar, Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Omar, Sor shel Koro Sava, Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul Omar, Gasho shel Svina Hava. Okay? So stated in the Brisa that Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul says that actually in the story of Rebbe it wasn't a pile of stones, rather it was a pile of beams that were going to be used in building project. Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul Amar Gasho shel Svina Hava. Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul says that it was actually the boats would have some kind of rod sticking off of the boats that they would use to indicate if the water was getting too shallow. So that's actually what it was, instead of stones. Mandamar Gasho is Koshkin Soar. The Mandamar who says that it was a boat thingy for telling if the water is too shallow. Well, and that's more sort of, people would be more makbid on that. Well, if that you would be able to make them not muksa, to make them mukhan for tomorrow, well then certainly this bunch of beams you would be able to make mukhan for tomorrow. Soar, fine, umandamar soar aval gashos kapid alei. But the Mandamar who says that it was a pile of beams, and that you could make mukhan for tomorrow. However, he would say that this instrument that they would use on a boat to tell if they're getting too shallow, he would be more makbid on that, and you wouldn't be able to make it mukhan for tomorrow. Fine. The Mishnah had said, Zmorashi kshura chulei. If you have a grapevine, and the grapevine is attached to a pitcher, and it's tied to a pitcher, so as long as the grapevine is tied to the pitcher, well then you can lower the pitcher into like a water source and fill it up with water. So kshura in, lo kshura lo. Well, that implies that the grapevine would have to actually mamash be tied to the pitcher. If it's not tied to the pitcher, then you wouldn't be able to use it, even if the grapevine is, shaped in such a way that you can easily hook it around the pitcher and lower it. But that's not enough, it would mamash have to be tied. Well, okay, well then the author of our Mishnah clearly cannot be Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Titania, as we learn in the Brisa, Charil shel dekel. If you take the branches of a palm tree and you cut them down, shegidron le'etzim, and you had cut them down in order to burn them. V'nimlach alein liyeshiva. But then you change your mind. You say, you know what? I don't want to burn them. I want to sit on them. So what do? So tzarich likshor. Well, you have to tie a few of the branches together and make some kind of a, seat. You have to actually do something and make them into like a seat. And then it's clear that it's for sitting and you can move it on Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer ein tzarich likshor. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you don't have to tie them together. You don't have to do anything. You can use them. So, let's say, our Mishnah that says that in order to use this grapevine, you would have to tie it to the pitcher. Well, clearly that's not Rabbi Gamliel because of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that by these branches of palm trees that you cut down and you decide that you want to use them now for sitting, you would not have to tie them together. And here we're saying that you would have to tie the grapevine to the pitcher. Amar Rav Sheshes afilu teim Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Sheshes says you could actually even argue that our Mishnah is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Hachav ma'askinim b'mechuberes be'aviyah. The reason why you have to tie it over here is because it's still connected to the to the actual grapevine. It's still connected to the ground. And because it's connected to the ground, it just looks like a grapevine. Therefore, I have to make some kind of clear indication that I'm intending to use it to connect to a pitcher to draw water. That's why you have to tie it. But if it was disconnected from the grapevine, you wouldn't have to tie it. Just like the palm branches that you wouldn't have to tie according to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. But come on, Rav Sheshes, how can you do that? How can you use something that's still connected to the ground? You can't use something still connected to the ground on Shabbos. Lemata mishlosha. So Rav Sheshes answers no, but this is talking about where it was in 3 tvachim of the ground, and if it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, you would be able to use a tree. And as Rashi points out, it's talking about like a spring that's nearby, that you don't have to, extend this pitcher down deep in order to get the water. It's really right there. And you have this branch from a grapevine that's within 3 tvachim of the ground, and it's tied, and it's still connected to the ground. Therefore, you have to tie it to the pitcher, and then you can use it to get spring water. Fine. And you have to tie it in order to indicate that you intend to use it to connect to the pitcher to get the spring water. However, if it was disconnected from the ground, you wouldn't have to tie it, and it's like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Alright. Rav Ashi gave a different answer. Afilutema betlusha. You can even say that, right, that it's separated from the ground. And still it could be like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Gezer Hashem yiktom. Now the difference is, specifically when it comes to the grapevine, if you haven't yet tied it to the ground and if you haven't yet tied it to the pitcher and tested it out to make sure that this is really what you want, well, then we're concerned that if you literally just take a grapevine and connect it to a pitcher on Shabbos, well, then maybe the grapevine will be too long and you'll kind of cut it down to make it the right size. Therefore, we want that before Shabbos because grapevine is soft. It's very tempting to kind of want to fix it to the right size, and that'll be makeh b'patish, making a kli. So therefore, we want you to tie it to the pitcher beforehand, so that before Shabbos, so that you prepare it properly. Okay, fine. This shutter of a window. So Rabbi Eliezer says that it would have to be both tied and hanging. According to the Chachamim, you don't need it to be tied and hanging. We still don't know necessarily what the Chachamim would require, to what extent they would require that it be tied and hanging. But let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hakol Modim she'ein osin oil arai betchila b'yamtiv ve'in tzarich lomim b'Shabbos. Says Rav Bar Chana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that everyone agrees, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim agree, that you would not be able to make any kind of a tent on Yom Tov and certainly not on Shabbos. Lo nechliku el lahosif. Where they argue is when we're talking about adding to an existing structure. You wouldn't be able to make a new structure on Shabbos or Yom Tov. But here where you already have your house and you're just putting a shutter over the window, we're concerned, is that some kind of a bonnet? Is that some kind of like adding onto your house? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ein Mosifim b'Yom Tov ve'en tzarich lomim b'Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer says you wouldn't be able to add onto your house on Yom Tov and certainly not on Shabbos. Chacham Mosifim b'Shabbos. Chacham Omer Mosifim b'Shabbos ve'en tzarich lomim b'Yom Tov. Chacham say no problem, you can add onto your house on Shabbos and certainly on Yom Tov. And therefore, because Rabbi Eliezer says that you wouldn't be allowed to add onto your house, therefore he requires that it be very clear that this shutter is already part of the house. That it has to be dangling from the window and clear that it's part of the window, that it's there for the window to close the window. Only then can you use it according to Rabbi Eliezer. According to the Chachamim, they're not so concerned. It doesn't have to be tied and dangling. It can be on the floor even. Whether it's tied, whether it's not, is a question we're going to get into soon. But according to them, we're not really concerned that you're going to be adding onto your house, and therefore it wouldn't have to be tied and dangling. Okay, friends. Well, we're going to stop here. That was Daf Kuf Chafei Amud. So that was Daf Kuf Chafei of Masechta Shabbos. It was a good Masechta. It was a good Daf. You had to pay attention, but it was good. So we talked about moving pieces of a broken oven, right? We had a three-way machlokas between Abaye, Rava, and Rav Ashi. Abaye said that, this machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is literally just the same machlokas as in our Mishnah. You have a kli, the kli broke, the pieces are used for something else, but not in the same way that it was initially used. Rabbi Meir says that it's not muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda says it is muktzah. Fine. Rava says, but what does that have to do with ovens? That has to do with just kalim in general. Therefore, we had this very interesting case where you have an oven that is in like a ditch, that's in a pit that you dug, and there's a fire at the bottom of the pit, but the fire is not strong enough to be able to heat up the oven. So it's not really considered that the oven is part of the ground. So in that case, Rabbi Yehuda would say that the oven is not mukshal l'kavatum, and it's also not a kli in general, and therefore it's muktzah. Whereas Rabbi Meir holds like the Chachamim and says, no, this would be considered a kli, and therefore it's not muktzah. Rav Ashi says, but then why are we talking about broken ovens? This is just talking about really ovens in general. So he gives his reason, which is that it breaks, so it's talking about, like we said originally, where you have an oven that broke, and the question is, is it usable in the same way that it was usable originally or not? So we're talking about where the oven broke, and these shards are kind of usable that you can put over a fire, and it'll get really hot, and then you could put some dough on top of that. Rabbi Meir is saying to Rabbi Yehuda, no, Rabbi Yehuda, wouldn't you say that in this case it's still considered like its original purpose for baking bread, and therefore you should be able to move it? Rabbi Yehuda says no. There are differences. When you bake bread, the fire is inside the oven. Here the fire is outside of this shard. And number two, when you bake bread in an oven, you put it vertically on the wall. Here you're only putting it on top of a shard, so neither of those things would so because of those two reasons, it wouldn't be considered similar to its original use. Then we had an interesting question about putting a stone on a barrel on Shabbos. So according to Rabbah, so first of all they say, look, according to both of them, if you forgot the stone on the barrel, well then you'll be able to just tilt the barrel and the stone will fall off. Fine. But if you put it there intentionally, Rabbah says, that won't, simply putting it there intentionally is not enough to make the stone a covering for the barrel, and therefore the stone just remains a stone, and it's muktzah, and therefore the barrel becomes a basas sadavar aser, and you really can't do anything about that. According to Rav Yosef, he says that simply putting the stone on top of the barrel is enough to make it a covering, and therefore it's just a covering of the barrel. You can literally just pick it up and take it off and take out the wine. Fine. And then there was like a story where Rebbe showed up at some place for Shabbos and with his students, and there were a bunch of stones there. And he told them, hey, go have some kind of a kavana, go set aside those stones that we can sit on them tomorrow, move them and sit on them tomorrow. So Rav Dimi / Rav Zera said, the name of Rav Chanina, said that Rebbe didn't require the students to actually do anything. Literally, I guess just to have kavana that we're going to use them tomorrow, that would be enough. Rabbi Ami said that Rebbe told them, no, you actually mamash have to take the stones and put them where you want them and organize them, and only then would they be considered mukhan that we can use them tomorrow. And Rabbi Asi says, no, it's kind of in between. They just kind of cleaned off the stones that they're no longer dirty. They didn't actually have to pick them up and put them down anymore in order to make them usable for Shabbos. And at the end we talked about tying a grapevine to a pitcher. So we say you would have to tie the grapevine to the pitcher. Then we said, well, that sounds like it's not like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that when it comes to branches that you took down from a palm tree initially to burn them, and you change your mind that you want to sit on them, whereas the Tanna Kamma over there says you'd have to tie them, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you don't have to tie them. And over here we're saying that you have to tie the grapevine to the pitcher, so it sounds like that's not Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So we gave two answers to say that maybe that it could be Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Sheshes says that over here, because the vine is still connected to the ground, that's why you have to tie it to the pitcher to show that that you intend to use it to connect it to the pitcher and draw water. Even Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel would agree to that. And Rav Ashi says that this case is different because by the grapevine, since it's soft, unless you tie it before Shabbos to the pitcher and make sure that it's really the way you want it, you might come to shorten it on Shabbos, which is a problem. So therefore, even Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would say that over here you have to tie the vine to the pitcher in order to make sure everything is just right before Shabbos, and you won't come to shorten anything on Shabbos. All right, friends. Well, that was Daf Kuf Chafei. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day or night or whatever. Peace.